DeMarco Murray running it back as Oklahoma Sooners running backs coach. What does it mean for the Sooners moving forward? We'll discuss on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. And Josh, the story of the day and really the buildup throughout the week has been what's up with DeMarco Murray. A lot of rumblings that he was being pursued not only by college teams, but NFL teams as well. And Ohio State of the Buckeye State was the team that was pursuing him maybe the most heaviest. And it turns out that the Oklahoma Sooners were able to retain Murray as their running backs coach. According to a story from Pete Nakos of On3, it's going to be a 3-year contract extension for Murray, who is expected to get a pay bump in the process.
Yeah, and obviously important for Oklahoma to keep DeMarco Murray around for a number of reasons that we'll touch on in just a moment. But, I don't know how serious the idea of DeMarco Murray leaving was, but obviously whenever you start hearing the rumblings that somebody like DeMarco Murray is interviewing or whatever interviewing looks or sounds like, whatever exactly the correct definition or full description of what that looked like, it raises the antennas to some degree. I would say, just judging by what it kind of felt like, and people you talked to this week, that maybe nationally Pete Nakos was more concerned than, say, locally how people felt. And I'm not saying one was right and the other was wrong. That's just sort of the feeling that this had, was that it was going to be a surprise for local media, for fans, if DeMarco Murray left. And again, that's not to say that it's impossible for DeMarco Murray, because he's this Sooner legend running back. And obviously got his, coaching, big part of the coaching career started with Oklahoma, that it's impossible that he would leave. But it would have felt like an upset, John, for that to have happened. So I think I start there, that it would have surprised me if he left, and obviously he's not leaving.
Yeah, it would have surprised me as well. And also, the more that I thought about it, the more I thought, okay, maybe you have to kind of get away from your alma mater a little bit if you're hoping to advance beyond just a position coach. I don't know what DeMarco Murray's career goals and aspirations are, but there's a saying in the Bible, a prophet's not welcome in his hometown. And a lot could be said for a position coach in his hometown, at his alma mater, that, okay, maybe the ceiling is just that. As they continue to reach outside the program for offensive coordinators and promote guys to that co-offensive coordinator role. That's not to say that DeMarco Murray couldn't ascend to that at Oklahoma, but maybe you start to wonder, like, okay, do I have a future beyond just being the running backs coach at Oklahoma? Now, he's really good. He's one of the best. Oklahoma's lucky to have him. But again, if he has aspirations beyond that, and he sees, okay, Seth Luttrell being brought in, and then adding I can't remember the Duke guy that they brought in as an analyst.
Kevin Johns.
Thank you, Kevin Johns. Bringing all these guys in, and then having Emmett Jones as part of your passing game attack, and Bill Beatembo, a co-offensive coordinator. You got to start to wonder. And anybody who has, career goals and aspirations, it's fair to wonder. And somebody who's recruited as well as DeMarco Murray has, he's going to have suitors out there. You can't have blue chip running back classes. You can't sign the number one running back in the 2024 cycle and then not get pursued by other schools and blue blood programs. I mean, the same thing happened. Jeff Lebby and Alabama had a bit of a flirtation back in the 2023 offseason. That's just what happens. It's kind of part of the game a little bit. Now, whether DeMarco was using all this for leverage to get a new extension with Oklahoma and get a pay bump. Who knows? Only DeMarco Murray and his family and his agent know that. But the Ohio State stuff was real. Ohio State was very interested. In particular, Ryan Day was very interested in bringing DeMarco Murray to Columbus. And I think that should tell you all you need to know about how DeMarco Murray is respected across the country. And thankfully, Oklahoma gets to keep him because, again, you're building a really, really nice running back room, and DeMarco Murray has a huge, huge hand in that, not just in what you've done in 2023, 2022, 2024, but also moving forward in 2025 and 2026 as well.
I think you touched on something that's important here. What are the career goals for DeMarco Murray? Here's somebody that, and I heard Parker talk about this a little bit earlier this week. It was one of the reasons that he wasn't concerned, I guess, with DeMarco Murray potentially leaving, or I shouldn't say that he wasn't concerned. I don't want to speak for him in that regard, but he felt more confident that DeMarco Murray would stay at Oklahoma versus leave, because guess what? DeMarco Murray doesn't need this big, massive pay raise. He's got a nice chunk of change from the NFL playing days, and that's certainly true. And I don't know DeMarco Murray personally and haven't asked him about his career goals or financially what his goals are. I just do subscribe a little bit to the theory, John, that everybody wants to be valued to some degree, whether or not you've got that nice nest egg or this or that. So I don't know what makes DeMarco Murray tick, but I can understand where even if his career goals aren't, okay, I want to be an offensive coordinator and then a head coach, which it very well may be that for DeMarco Murray. And if it is that, then, thinking about interviewing and exploring opportunities elsewhere would make sense, because you don't want to say that there is a ceiling in Norman, but it's maybe harder to break through that ceiling more rapidly if you stay here in Norman, just because look, you go somewhere else and you do the kind of things that you've done in Norman, and all of a sudden that next opportunity happens quickly. But having said that, look, again, I think everybody wants to feel good about their situation, want to feel valued, and DeMarco should feel that. So if this was all about, okay, new 3-year deal and a hefty pay bump, whatever that ultimately looks like, then, man, DeMarco Murray bringing in Taylor Tatum, Sawchuk doing what he did to end last season. We'll see what the future holds for Javonte Barnes, Xavier Robinson. It looks like he's going to continue getting big-time production out of Oklahoma's running backs. And so you want to lock this kind of guy up. And for DeMarco, I guess what I'm saying, John, and probably not the most eloquent way of all time, is, hey, you can't really blame a guy for maybe wanting to advance his career or wanting to see that financial value next to his name, even if he doesn't need it, right? Even if it's just a, hey, I'm worth this, and I know that I'm worth it kind of thing, and I want to see that from the university. Hey, you are worth it, DeMarco, and OU needed to get this thing done.
Yeah, I get, and I'm not going to downplay what Parker's saying about the Eagles contract that he got when he left Dallas in free agency. And I mean, he made big time money. At the same time, he's still a young man and has a lot of earning potential for himself and his family. Nobody takes that lightly, no matter what you've made in the past. Does he need it? No, but it's a business. There's a business aspect to this. And as you mentioned, Josh, you want to be valued. He's got to see all the other assistants on staff get pay bumps this offseason. It's fair to ask the question, well, where's mine? And he's recruited as well as anybody on staff at this point. You can even go back to just the production the running back room has had since his arrival. You look at Ramondre Stevenson and what the second half of that 2020 season would have looked like had he not been ready to go. Because, I mean, Ramondre was arguably the MVP of the second half as Oklahoma went on that COVID year Big 12 title run with Spencer Rattler at quarterback. And then Kennedy Brooks. I mean, Kennedy Brooks, his name is up there among some of the best of Oklahoma history because of what he was able to accomplish in just a few years at Oklahoma. And then we saw a breakout year from Eric Gray, helped him get drafted by the New York Giants. So DeMarco Murray has very much earned the respect and the pursuit of blue blood programs from across the country, as well as this extension and pay bump from the Oklahoma Sooners. We get to know a little bit about the 2025 SEC opponents. They're pretty familiar to us, though, as at this point. Are we happy? Are we sad? How are we feeling about Oklahoma's opponents in 2025? We'll discuss next on Locked On Sooners. This week, March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. The Oregon Ducks are obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. It's a team that absolutely surprised us all with a powerhouse performance in the final Pac-12 tournament, punching their ticket to the big dance and kicking Oklahoma out of it, taking a bid from the Sooners. They say win life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Ducks have done here. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure over at shopnissanusa.com.
Fire TV, it's your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV, it offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can just plug right in to your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for Major League Baseball or the NCAA tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Plus, Fire TV recently created their Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us right here at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all of the latest in the world of sports, not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking shows, whatever you're into. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, well, you should. Trust us on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV.
And the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 channel, that is your spot for everything happening in the world of sports. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And Josh, the another big story coming out of the Wednesday news cycle was the SEC decided that for the 2025 season, they'll continue to play an 8-game conference schedule, and the opponents were revealed for basically everybody. It's the second half of a home and home stretch. Oklahoma's 2024 opponents, they'll be the same opponents for the Sooners in 2025, except we'll flip who visits who. So if you aren't familiar, the Oklahoma Sooners in 2024 will play Ole Miss, Auburn, South Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, LSU, Missouri, and Texas. Obviously, the Texas Longhorns. So those games that are going to be home games for Oklahoma, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Alabama. Oklahoma will go on the road for those. The home or the away games in 2024, Oklahoma will host Ole Miss, Auburn, LSU. Thank goodness. I don't want to go to Baton Rouge again. Missouri and Auburn. So what do you think, Josh? Do you like it? Do you think it's smart? Does this kind of lay out something maybe for a different format moving forward?
Yeah, I don't dislike it, I guess. But I like it because it's an SEC schedule. It's exciting. It makes sense. I would sort of characterize it like this. I think that the SEC had the easy button in front of it, and it hit the easy button. I don't know that it's the best option to me for Oklahoma fans, just because, again, you'd like to see Georgia and Florida. To me, versus just flip-flopping the opponents home and away, I would have liked to have just seen everybody that we hadn't already seen in the SEC from an Oklahoma perspective. But again, so I forced to choose, I'd probably lean more on the dislike than the like on the scale, but I'm not super up in arms about it. I understand that putting together this schedule for this amount of teams is in and of itself challenging. and this was kind of for all parties probably pretty easy. I'd be curious to know, though, what the reaction is from Oklahoma fans and then beyond OU and Texas fans. I mean, how do longtime SEC fans feel about this? I would imagine there are some upset feelings that, again, it's just, flip the schedule instead of, hey, we're going to see everybody within the conference over a 2-year period like we were kind of sort of promised.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would have liked to see a different group of 7 teams along with Texas as part of it. But I think you're right. I think this is just Greg Sankey and then the decision makers just saying, you know what, this is going to be the simplest thing for 2025 as we still try to figure out, are we going to be an 8-game conference schedule or a 9-game conference schedule? What's the playoff going to look like in we found out that in 2026, there's a potential that could go to 14 teams with a new deal with ESPN in that $1.3 billion college football playoff package. So I think they're still maybe trying to figure out, okay, what is the landscape of college football going to look like? Because what it looks like today, I mean, in just a few years' time, it could look very, very different. Even the conferences, the Big Ten, the SEC, the Big 12 could all look very, very different when we get to 2026. That making a decision right now based on what you think the conference is going to look like in 3 years is maybe a little bit fool's gold. You don't want to look too far ahead because conference realignment is just always happening. I think Red Dirt Sport says it the best over on Twitter. He says conference realignment is always, and it's true. I mean, it's ever evolving, and who knows who could be a part of the SEC when we get to, year 3 of Oklahoma and Texas now being a part of the Southeastern Conference. So there's a lot that is interesting here. Again, I would have loved to see, Georgia instead of Bama, or, maybe go see Kentucky instead of Tennessee. Get that Vanderbilt. Can we get a little Vanderbilt on the schedule, please? Please, please, just once. And then I saw somebody mention still Georgia and Texas A&M haven't gotten a chance to play each other on the football field yet too, which is mind-boggling to me that that's even transpired.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's another opportunity to kick that can further down the road, just for the entertainment's sake of saying that it hasn't happened. Arkansas, again, I know that I get clowned on by some for this take, but I really would like to see that develop into something for Oklahoma. And again, I think, you don't play it, to me, is a little bit disappointing. I still would love to see a world where Oklahoma gets 3 permanent opponents and Arkansas is one of them because of the regionality factor to it. But look, it's an SEC schedule. It's exciting. It, again, makes sense for the reasons that we've discussed, which is it's simple. And now nobody feels like, hey, well, wait a second, we went to LSU and LSU didn't come here. So that part, in Tennessee, same thing there. It's like, hey, we went to Norman and but OU didn't come here. Alabama, same thing. So, and I don't know what the athletic director's office is, if there was some of that from athletic directors, John, that sort of they were feeding Sankey in the SEC office that, well, really, we'd rather just complete these as home and home. So, what one fan might want is maybe not the same as what athletic directors or the SEC offices clearly wanted here. So one final question on this. Is this more about it's simple, or is this about we don't know about 8-9 game, or is this about expansion in your mind? Why, if you had those options to pick from, why do we get this scheduling format?
I'm gonna go with B, that we don't know about 8 or 9 games yet. This is a conference that's been debating that since Oklahoma and Texas announced that they were moving to the SEC. Would we play 8 conference games in a 1-by-7, format, or a 3-by-6 in a 9-game schedule? How is it all going to work out? I just don't think there's been a firm agreement on how they're going to structure that, because I mean, the long-standing annual games in the SEC, there are so many of them, and trying to figure out how to make everybody happy is going to be a really, really difficult task, because it goes beyond just Auburn, Alabama. Well, Auburn, Georgia, those two are not in the same division, but they have played every year, if I'm not mistaken, for ever. Florida, LSU. I mean, cross-divisional game that plays every single year. So it's trying to figure out how to make all of that work while bringing Oklahoma and Texas into the mix and giving everybody a chance at Oklahoma and Texas and having those big brands come home. So I think it's still just a matter of, okay, we haven't quite figured out how to make the new pieces fit. So this is, again, we'll also choose A, and this is going to be the simple answer for now as we continue to work over the next 2 years to figure out how this is all going to work together.
I agree, but just seeing if I could get you to bite on option number 3 there.
Option number 3 is very much a reality. And as we see the legal process play out between ACC members and their conference leadership, which we're going to discuss next, who knows what the future of the SEC holds? Coming up on Locked On Sooners.
Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the NCAA tournament, whether you're betting on a big upset or that chalk, baby, that number 1 seed. It's time to go dancing on America's number 1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all, who's cutting down those nets. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked on and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Some of the numbers out there for those of you that maybe haven't looked: UConn, your national champion favorite, they're plus 370. Houston, a lot of folks, a lot of OU fans, I think, rooting for Kelvin to get his first, plus 550. Purdue 7-1, Arizona 12-1, North Carolina 18-1, Tennessee similar odds, and Auburn similar odds at 18-1. Iowa State, best Big 12 odds, sans Houston, they are 20-1 to cut down the nets. And again, all of that, FanDuel.com/locked on.
Before we get to this ACC stuff, Josh, I know you saw this, but I wanted to share it with our viewers here on YouTube. This is Jacob Sexton, Oklahoma's projected starting left tackle, basically throwing himself out sideways as he's holding on to a pole down there in Brazil as the Soul Mission continues to do their community service work. This one just blew me away. Like, this is a 6'5", 320-pound dude holding himself up by his arms, perpendicular or parallel to the ground, like a flag. It's just ridiculous, Josh. I think Oklahoma's offensive line is going to be just fine when you have that kind of strength and athleticism and flexibility that's going to be manning that left tackle spot.
Was he just literally like hanging on to the pole, or was he spinning around? What was going on?
I think he was just like doing that circus maneuver where you kind of use your leverage and your core and you just hold on to it and kick your legs out sideways and hold yourself up. I don't know, man. It was quite impressive. Back to college football, the ACC, man, it's got issues. Their grant of rights media deal through 2036, it just is poor. It's bad. It's bad business, bad financial decision made by that conference leadership. It was arguably a bad financial decision made by the presidents and athletic directors that agreed to the grant of rights. But yet you're seeing Florida State, now Clemson, using litigation and using the court system to try and work their way out of it. And so my question to you, Josh, on this is kind of relative to our schedule discussion that we just had in the last segment, is part of why we don't know what the college football landscape is going to look like in 2026, partly due to seeing how Florida State's lawsuit against the ACC and now Clemson's lawsuit against the ACC, how that could potentially impact the way our conferences look in 2026.
I don't think so from the scheduling front with the SEC, but I do think that Greg Sankey is very obviously aware of the tectonic plates that are boiling underneath. And, I would imagine everybody is not naive to this because, look, I mean, we knew that Florida State was maneuvering to try and take a slice away from that ACC grant of rights that looks pretty strong. I don't know if the Clemson lawsuit is enough to tear down the ACC grant of rights either. But one thing that's certain is Clemson and Florida State, they're going to try. I mean, that much is obvious. And I think it would be naive to not suspect that both the Big Ten and SEC have legitimate interest in Clemson, in Florida State, and in a couple of other ACC programs, perhaps, right? Clemson and Florida State are sort of the obvious two. Clemson because they've won national championships recently, Florida State for its history under Bobby Bowden, and then, of course, this past season, getting back to national ramifications and being a national player. North Carolina because of basketball and because football has been good. Virginia, for whatever reason, the market, I guess that has some folks intrigued. And then, maybe a Miami or a couple of others. Duke, because of basketball, could be a little bit of a surprise, but I would put them well under the radar of some of the other first schools that were listed there. But could it lead to expansion? Absolutely. It could lead to expansion. Do I know definitively that they're about to win this lawsuit? I don't know that I do. I kind of think I favor the ACC on that, but they're clearly, as best they can, John, trying to maneuver a way out of this grant of rights.
Yeah, you listen to ACC leadership talk, and they're talking pretty confidently in that, hey, everybody signed this. Clemson, you signed it. You know what you got into. You may have made a bad decision, but you still made the decision, and you're still with us. And we expect all of our member schools to be a part of the ACC through the grant of rights agreement. It's going to be interesting to see. One of the points that Clemson is making in their lawsuit is kind of intriguing to me. And I'll be curious to see how the court rules on this. Is that the ACC is responsible for Clemson's media rights as long as Clemson is a part of the ACC. Well, what if they're not a part of the ACC? What's the ACC's role in Clemson's media rights? Man, and that's just going to be a lot of how does a judge interpret all of this stuff? But it's going to be fascinating to watch. I mean, if it does lead to expansion, I don't know if Clemson is the best fit with the SEC. I think Florida State, Miami, I think North Carolina would be a fantastic fit as well. And then find another program, even at Virginia Tech. That might not be the most obvious choice, but a rich football program, pretty good baseball program that fits in pretty well with the SEC. But again, I think North Carolina is a slam dunk. That's one of those teams you want to go get. Duke, I think, could be a pretty intriguing option as well. Kind of in the similar vein as Kentucky. Kind of a middle, mid-tier football program, but that elite basketball program that might be enough to kind of put you over the top. And then if you're able to get Duke and North Carolina into the SEC, does that raise your basketball profile to be on par with the Big 12 in future years? It's an intriguing thing to follow. And I really do think the SEC will expand again down the line. It's just a matter of when and how many teams they bring in.
Yeah, I think so too. And it'll be interesting. I could see a scenario where a number of these teams, maybe 4 go to the SEC, 2 go to the Big Ten, and all of a sudden, what would that get us to? 20, and even 20 in both. And if Duke's not one of those teams, and what that would mean for the ACC, Duke to me would then be a natural fit for the Big 12. That if the ACC kind of craters like we saw the Pac-12 crater, then Duke would make sense to join a basketball heavy league. So that could be another domino to watch down the road if Duke is not ultimately selected, as it were, for the Big Ten or the SEC, though obviously basketball will at least give them a puncher's chance. But yeah, it's just fascinating, man. I don't think, clearly the musical chairs haven't stopped, and Clemson and Florida State have figured out something that it doesn't take a genius to figure out, which is, everybody else that we're competing against is about to make a lot more money than us year after year after year, year over year. And that just is what it is. That gets problematic.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And another final note on this is Brett Yormark's kind of done a pretty good job at positioning the Big 12 as a basketball conference, just in the marketing and how they're getting, how they do their tournament and just the way that they're promoting the the conference as a basketball conference, that could be very intriguing for a team like Virginia or Duke or even North Carolina. If they're looking at expansion, like, hey, well, let's go to a place that really is going to value what we put on the hardwood each night and each season. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. Also, go check out the Locked On Sports Today National 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Follow Josh on Twitter at Josh on Ref, myself at John 9 Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners. But until next time, he's Josh. I'm John. Boomer Sooner.